to another action-packed episode of the Between the Hash Marks podcast. I'm Matt Lombardo, joined as always by my friend, mentor, and the purveyor of the Two Deep Zone on Substack, Mike Tanier. Mike, what's going on, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well today. I hope you're doing well. I'm a little tilted though. I wake up to the news that Zach Taylor has put a ping pong table in the Bengals locker room.
And this is an automatic trigger for you. I know that whether it's the cornhole boards or the Pop-A-Shot or the ping pong tables, that seems to get under your skin as far as the locker room culture goes.
I don't mind when they're there. The Pop-A-Shot was a big one in Philly.
Yes.
I don't mind when they're there. I don't mind when they're not there. I mind when the coach decides that the best way to change the culture is to start moving them back and forth over and over again. Ben Standig has been doing a joke about this for the Washington Post for years. It's like you either have it or you don't. It doesn't change. It doesn't make the Bengals contenders that after 5 years now, he's putting a ping pong table in.
Right. Or if they would take it away, it's not
Yeah.
like some sort of punishment because these guys would then just go to the player lounge where there's a ping pong table anyway, where these guys all hang out and congregate. And speaking of congregating, if you're listening to us on the way to grandma's house for Thanksgiving, if you're out trying to pick up the turkey at the last minute, well, good luck. But just so you don't miss another episode anytime moving forward, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, Spotify. You can check me out on YouTube at Matt Lombardo 975, and be sure to subscribe to Mike Tanier on Substack at the Two Deep Zone. And of course, I'm on Substack as well at Matt Lombardo NFL at Between the Hash Marks. And now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, Mike, it seems like the Eagles are turning a corner and rounding into form, beginning to look the part as legitimate Super Bowl contenders, maybe even right alongside the Lions in the NFC.
That's it. And, I don't have all the numbers in front of me from FTN Network and the DVOA analysis, but the Lions are number one. The Eagles are number two, and there's kind of a gap there in the NFC. So much so that Aaron Schatz told me yesterday there's a greater than 80% chance that the Eagles are the number two seed in the NFC. That's
right, because you look at the NFC West and it's kind of a logjam, and the Seahawks might have separated themselves just a little bit thanks to their defense coming up big in a big spot against the Arizona Cardinals that were really the upstarts in that division. The NFC South, you kind of throw those teams, two of them into a hat and pull one of them out and you get the division champ, whether it winds up being the Atlanta Falcons or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it really is the Lions, the Eagles, and everybody else. And in Philadelphia, it's getting back to that mentality and that formula and that form of dominant opportunistic defense, dominant ground game with an offensive line that just punishes you and beats you into submission as the game goes along.
Yeah, and that was very interesting because what we saw on Sunday night was the offensive line struggling in pass protection early. So there was a commitment to the run, and they were having no problems in the run. I think that Rams front four is very much a pass rushing front four, and you can hammer them a little bit. So hammer them. And sure enough, you punish these guys a little bit, and they're a little more reluctant on the pass rush, and then you can create a more balanced opportunity. And the Eagles are getting better. They're playing better opponents as weeks go on, and yet getting better against them, which is good because they got a really tough opponent next week.
Absolutely. And, I've kind of been the litmus test guy for the Eagles on this podcast all year long, wanting to see what they did against quality competition while they handled Washington at home, wanting to see what they do in a road environment against a playoff caliber team. They embarrassed the Rams in a lot of ways in their own building on Sunday night. I think they've checked every box. Now, the big one is going to come Sunday against the Ravens. We'll get into that one a little bit later on in the podcast. But I think what impresses me the most about this Eagles team is when they should be wearing down, they're just getting stronger. I mean, the first play from scrimmage in the second half, Saquon Barkley explodes off right tackle for that 70-yard touchdown run that demoralizes the Los Angeles Rams. And then later in the fourth quarter, it's another 72-yard run where there isn't a Rams defender in the area code. The closest one might have been on Santa Monica Pier hanging out once he got past the second level of that defense. I look at this offense, they're having their way with opponents. They're putting up quality wins week after week, and they seem to be insulating themselves from the type of collapse that we saw last year. And I wrote it Monday in 4 Downs. This feels a lot more like the team that went to the Super Bowl following a very clear identity and formula than it is a team at risk of some sort of calamity happening down the stretch.
That's exactly it. And, both of us are based here in Greater Philly, and we get the doomerism on all sides. And I'm hearing less Nick Sirianni needs to be like tossed into the river. I'm hearing a lot less of that. But it's hard to get Eagles fans to say, no, this is more like that team, or, the 2018 team, if I have the year right, than this team that caused all this, PTSD here in Philadelphia. And, Saquon has a lot to do with it. And you know me, and you know how I get with the MVP conversation.
Are we going to now change course on this? Are we going to have a course correction for Mike Tanier because it involves a Philadelphia Eagle? Are we going to change the debate, change the conversation from which quarterback to which quarterback or Saquon Barkley?
No, we are not. Here's the thing about the Super Bowl conversation. If you're not going to put a dollar on it, if you wouldn't put a dollar on it, then you shouldn't talk about it. Because I said you got to spend some of this money right now. You would go and you'd put it on Josh Allen. You would. Anyone would. The guy at the bar in Philly who's crying MVP. Here, this money has to go on something. They're going to put it on Josh Allen. They're going to put it on Lamar Jackson, etc. We also have, and again, we talk to the voters. We know how the voters think, and the voters are extremely, extremely reluctant to give it to a non-quarterback. You also have Saquon right now, minus 275 for Offensive Player of the Year. So he's got his award that, give Saquon OPOY. Done. That's how a voter's going to think. But I was trying to think, let's push past that. Is there a path? Is there a path?
I think there is, only because when you look at what the Eagles are this year and what Saquon has done, he's been a force multiplier for them. He's been an identity forger for them, because last year they lacked that player, that weapon that you could just say, okay, go win this game. He won the game for them with the touchdown run off the turnover against Washington. He won the game for them this past week with the two big runs against the Rams. Off the top of my head, you could think of four or five of
Saints game.
Yeah, the Saints game as well. The Saints game, there's 3 to 5 victories that you can point to and say, without Saquon Barkley, that goes a different way. And if this team winds up being a top 2 seed in the NFC and Saquon finishes, let's pick a nice round number that he's on pace to beat, 2,000 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. And let's say the Eagles finish 5-1 down this closing stretch, and one of those wins is either against Lamar Jackson's Baltimore Ravens or against the Pittsburgh Steelers that boast, I don't care what the rankings say, one of the most, if not the most ferocious defenses in the league. Then I think at 2,000 yards, Saquon Barkley with 16 touchdowns and some signature victories in his back pocket for a top 2 seed, that's when I think the MVP conversation becomes legitimate.
Well, I think it takes more than that. You mentioned some of it. Let's see a Ravens victory with a 100-yard game from Saquon, because that further validates Saquon, and it tarnishes Lamar a little bit, because a lot of this is about that. A lot of it's about Josh Allen, and I think the conversation has to start to knock Josh Allen out, to have me in that mind. The 49ers got to win. Not only do the 49ers got to win against the Bills, which is a very tall order, but Allen has to have one of his YOLO ball 2 interception games, which we haven't seen in about a year and a half. Because otherwise, Allen is just going to hold serve and win the MVP award. So you need that. You need all the things you said about the Eagles. I think 2,000 yards, stay healthy, is a given at this point. I don't know what the Eagles' record's going to be. It's going to be outstanding. I think there's a couple other things. You need 2 or 3 Chiefs losses down the stretch, so that a lifetime achievement award for Mahomes is off the table.
Yes.
And you also need the Lions to not finish 16-1, so that there's no default. Well, I guess Jared Goff, maybe we give him his opportunity. He's been playing well except for one 5 interception game. You need all of those, because it can't just be, because you can like stack achievements for Saquon and you're just giving him worst money line for Offensive Player of the Year, as long as Josh Allen and Lamar and a couple of the other guys are in the conversation.
For sure. And I don't even know, outside of Lamar Jackson throwing 3 interceptions and the Eagles blowing them out on Sunday, I don't even know that a poor Lamar Jackson performance against the Eagles, based on everything that he's done up to this point, and we're projecting the Ravens to do from here, based on their identity, based on how they're winning games, based on how vital Lamar Jackson is to their success. I don't even know that a 250-yard, 1 interception, 20-17 loss to the Eagles derails his campaign and elevates Saquon Barkley. So if you're comparing apples to oranges, which this is, quarterback versus running back, that's got to be a pretty shiny apple. And I think that's where the achievements by Saquon are going to need to just completely overwhelm and overshadow anything that these other quarterbacks are doing.
And if that's the case, 2,000 yards isn't going to cut. He's going to shatter records. honestly, to get to that point. Because you're right. I'm not talking like, oh, if Lamar loses, he's out of the MVP race. So if Lamar loses that game, it's kind of a signal that the Ravens are going to have. You saw what they did last night. It was a pretty convincing win, even though they committed every penalty they possibly could
Yes.
to keep the Chargers in the game and to nerf themselves. They'll have another game or two like that. And then Lamar looking for his third trophy. There might be some reluctance there. A lot of it's Josh Allen. A lot
Yes.
of it's Josh Allen. Because if he can just be on cruise control and they go 13-4 or whatever, he's going to win.
And everybody's going to remember the 23-yard touchdown run through the heart of the Chiefs defense to win that game. That's the signature moment of the season so far. We could talk about Saquon Barkley's runs, as impressive as they were against the Rams. We could talk about him putting the Eagles on his back in New Orleans and winning that game. We could talk about running roughshod over the Commanders. In the game's biggest moment of the biggest regular season game of this season, with the most at stake for both teams, potentially home field advantage, depending on what happens with the Chiefs, Josh Allen went out and won that game. And to me, that's where when your team is facing a do or die moment and you deliver like that, you vault into the clubhouse leader position for me when it comes to MVP.
That's it. That's it. And by the way, we're talking about clubhouse leaders. The Eagles did suffer a blow. Long time Eagle defense. And Brandon Graham out for the year, promises to be a leader in absentia. So I guess him and Jason Kelce are going to be bumping into each other, trying to go and hang out with the guys every week. But what are your thoughts? You did more face-to-face coverage of Graham than I did. Thoughts and memories of him.
Yeah, Brandon Graham isn't just an iconic player in the history of the franchise, because you can't tell the story of the Philadelphia Eagles without telling the story of the strip sack in the Super Bowl of Tom Brady to win that game. Yes. All-time Eagles defender, all-time leader, as you mentioned. The thing I'll remember about Brandon Graham, and here's the thing, he's the type of guy that I could see leaving his locker intact and just hanging around the building, not necessarily coming in and out, working out like Jason Kelce does, but basically hanging around with the guys. The story I remember about Brandon Graham is my career kind of took a little bit of a winding path, right? I was on the Eagles beat for the first 3 or 4 years, in that building every day, in the locker room every day, forging friendships and working relationships with guys like Brandon Graham and some other players we'll mention in a minute here. But then I went up and I covered the Giants for 4 years, and I was in the Giants locker room. And then I became a national reporter, which is kind of the role that I'm in these days. And about 2 years ago, when I was working at Heavy Sports, I did a mini training camp tour of the Eagles, Giants, Commanders, Jets, a couple other teams. And when I was in Philadelphia after practice, Brandon Graham came over to do the media scrum. But before he even went to the scrum, he was like, "Wait, you're back? What are you doing here? Are you back full time?" Blah, 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 blah. Remembered me from 3 to 4 years earlier when I was around the team every single day. And that stuck with me, that he was just a genuine, and is. He didn't die. He tore it.
I know. Like
he's a great, genuine guy and active in the community, good teammate, all those things.
Yeah. And you know what? I've got 2 memories. One is when he was drafted. This was so long ago, he was drafted, Andy Reid era. I was in the teacher's lounge with the other teachers, and one of the guys, and we were debating what happened in the draft on Saturday, coming on Monday morning. And the teacher's like, "We better not have gotten us another one of them Mike Mamula types."
Oh no,
Brandon Graham, because that's how long ago it was that like Mike Mamula was still in the minds. I think Mike Mamula is still in the minds of guys our age.
Yes.
But like, and it's like, no, this kid from Georgia, he's real solid. And it took 2 or 3 years for Brendan Graham to get going. But when I would do Eagles media, he was the first one, like walking around, like, "Hey, can you give me a couple of thoughts and things like that?" Always turned around, big smile on his face. Second or third time he met you, how's it going? Bleacher Report would send me to ask the stupidest questions sometimes, like asking people like what their favorite TV shows and things like that are. And you're going into
put out the player surveys that run with all 32 teams, input and all that stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like a lot of the guys refuse to do it. Like, this is beneath me. And you can see, like, because that sometimes, "Hey, man, can you do this favor for me?" I could go up to him and say, favorite anime character, favorite movie, favorite whatever, and sit and joke around, tell you stuff like that. I would ask, I had to ask him, who 3-on-3 basketball, who's your guys? And he had to tell me who in the locker room was a 3-on-3 basketball player. Nick Foles was one of them. I remember that. Apparently, Nick Foles has an absolute like killer jump shot or something like that. And just the amount,
among other things.
You see. So like, there are a handful of guys that I was always able to talk to. Malcolm Jenkins was another.
Yes.
but like he had to be number one on the list of guys I knew I could get while in the locker room a great quote out of, or it's like something valuable and like a good interpersonal connection out of.
Absolutely. I think that explains him as the player, as the person in terms of media relations and those sort of things. But we're going to do some power rankings later in the show, some fun ones.
Yeah.
But real quick, top 5 locker room guys of all time for you.
Okay. I'm going to go with Brendan Graham.
Okay.
Then I'm going to go with Malcolm Jenkins. Then Torrey Smith. And both of those guys, there was a lot of politics beat, if you remember back in the day.
Yes.
Both of them were incredibly gracious in that respect. I go with Josh McCown.
Ooh, great one.
Went out of his way to pick up the phone and call me and go over stuff, a lot of different things along the way, and really helped me with that. And that's not when he was affiliated with the Eagles. He just kind of like, I just kind of worked with him along the way. And I'm afraid I don't have a number 5. I did the Giants beat, and there were some great guys along the way there. I did a little stuff with the Jets. I've done a lot of national. There's people I was able to talk to on the phone a lot. But in terms of going into the locker room, I don't know if I've got a number 5. And I think you've got a really cool list.
I do have a cool list. I'm going to go Brandon Graham at number 1 for all the reasons we spoke about. Lane Johnson at number 2.
Oh.
And quick aside on Lane Johnson, him and Brandon Brooks shared locker stalls next to one another. And if you remember, Michael Lombardi wrote a column, I believe it was in the 2017 or 2019 season, about how Doug Peterson was in over his head and, he shouldn't be a head coach and, he overmatched. So I go in the locker room one day and I needed to talk to the offensive line about something, and the scrum breaks. And Brandon taps me on the shoulder and he goes, "Hey, I was so ticked off at you for what you wrote about because I'm Matt Lombardo, that's Michael Lombardi." And he goes, "Well," and Lane, and I said to Lane, I said, "Can you believe that this swinging dick would walk in the locker room after everything that he wrote about our coach?" And Lane laughed at him and said, "No, that's Matt Lombardo. It's a different guy." And Lane and I always had a really tight relationship, but that story kind of stuck with me. The mistaken identity with Michael Lombardi within the Eagles locker room.
I'm just remembering something. I was in the Giants locker room. I was wearing one of my like olive colored, like this color, but it's a sports coat. And Odell walked by, grabbed it. Hey, nice sport coat. I couldn't be spoken to for 3 days after. I'd be in the coffee line. Someone would be turning around with coffee. So raining out, isn't it? Odell Beckham said he liked my sport coat. But that's great. Lane Johnson sticking up for you. That's an amazing opportunity. I know you and Lane really stayed, pretty close after that. Who else you got?
That was a lot of fun. I have Sterling Shepard at number 3 from my time with the Giants. He was kind of the Brandon Graham of the Giants. Whether it was quote unquote his day to talk, because these guys typically have days that they're assigned to meet the media at their locker, whether it was his day or not, you could always walk up and get an extra quote or two or some insight from Sterling Shepard. And when I had kids, he was the first one to ask how they were doing and how she was and all that. And then his wife had a baby, so we kind of bonded over that a little bit. So Sterling Shepard at number 3. I have Malcolm Jenkins at number 4. A lot of the same reasons that you do, because he was very outspoken on the social injustice conversations and very a proponent of putting action and not just words into the causes that he believes in. So he's number 4. I have a mystery Eagle at number 5 that I will not name.
Oh,
a pretty cool story.
Okay, so tell me about Alshon Jeffrey. No, it's not Alshon.
It's not Alshon.
Alshon. It's not Alshon. I know that for a fact.
It's not Alshon Jeffrey, but when I was on the Eagles beat, it was always a point of pride for me on cut down day. I wanted to nail the cuts before any of the other reporters, get them on social, maybe get the Adam Schefter retweet, So Sports Center, Eagles released Tim Tebow as reported by Matt Lombardo of NJ.com. That part actually happened. So I spoke to an Eagles player and I said, "Hey man, what's your drink of choice?" And he told me it was Crown Royal. And I'm like, "All right." I said, "Do you come in and work out on cut down day?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll be in the building." I said, "How about I go get you a bottle of Crown if you walk in and you let me know?" So I got a text message on cut down day. He would walk in and look at each of the nameplates that were removed from the lockers and text me the list. I might have actually broken some of these before the Turks started knocking doors.
That's amazing. And it's a little look, folks, into how the sausage is actually made. Crown Royal, was it Chris Long?
It was not Chris Long, but ethically it might blur the lines a little bit. But because I'm no longer on the beat, I feel
imagine what the big time people are doing to get this.
very
And
true.
$30 bottle of Crown. Like, I don't want to think about what the big time people to get the big time scoops. Not a little help. That's amazing, though.
Yeah, so those are my top five, and some great trips down memory lane of how the sausage is made on the NFL beat. But one of the more controversial figures this season, Mike, has been Tua Tagovailoa because of
Yes.
not only the concussions that he suffered and the debate around whether he should or should not be playing. I think you and I kind of agree that because of the concussion risk and the CTE, maybe this is a mistake to keep putting him out there. But because he's playing, I feel that it's fair and proper to analyze him in this offense with him as a football player rather than everything else that happened with the injuries and all those things.
Right. He's a grown man who made a grown man decision to do a thing. Seems a little wobbly, but like, you can follow me around and say, you should not be eating that macaroni and cheese, sir.
Same.
Anyway, so Tua, they're in the playoff chase. He's
Yes.
gotten them in the playoff chase with this winning streak. He's playing well. What else we got?
Yeah, I look at them right now, and just watching that game against Drake May and the Patriots, who seemed to be feeling themselves a little bit going into Sunday, and seemed like Drake May was starting to turn a corner. Well, the Dolphins went out and embarrassed them on Sunday afternoon, and Tua goes for 317, the only quarterback around the league to throw 4 touchdowns. In a lot of ways, it's a get-right game for Tua and the Dolphins of a big test on Thursday night, on Thanksgiving night in Green Bay. But it got me thinking, we all kind of see that this offense is, in a lot of ways, even more so than any other team when they lose their starting quarterback. There's a Tao of Tua. The Tua offense runs. It's a completely different identity, completely different offense, completely different functionality with Tua and without him.
Yeah, it's weird. In fact, they put Skyler in for one play. He fumbled.
Right. So I texted a current offensive coordinator on the bye week, and I said, what's the deal here? Why are the Dolphins so different with and without Tua? And he just replied, most teams are different without their starting quarterback. And I said, okay, thank you, appreciate it. Talk to you later. A brush off. So I reached out to our good pal, our drinking buddy, your podcast partner in a different life, Aaron Schatz of FTN. And I said, what's the difference? What do the metrics say? And the Dolphins, this even astounded me based on what my eyes were seeing, that the Dolphins ranked first in the league in EPA per dropback, which is expected points per attempt, in weeks 8 to 12 of this season with Tua, but they were ranked 29th in the league from weeks 3 to 6 without him. So third worst in the league to best with Tua Tagovailoa. So the data also backs up what we're seeing with these Dolphins.
The data does, and the blow up by the coordinator. Thanks. Obviously, he was busy with something else. Yes. Like, come on, man. It's like we see backup quarterbacks win games constantly in the NFL, and they couldn't do anything without him. Tua's probably better. Like the guys who really study the film and look at the RPM and the velocity and the process. He's better than he looks under those circumstances. It's not the prettiest way of doing it, but it's extremely effective. And I go back to, and I think I said this a couple weeks ago, there are so many play fakes and so many little micro adjustments in that offense that the little things like being able to fake the handoffs properly and sell the idea that the ball is going into the flat to the right to Tyreek before you throw it to John O. Smith on the seam, etc. All that very subtle, soft skill type stuff. Tua, I think, is very comfortable with it. I think he excels at it. He's taken the time to master it. And when they go to the backup, and this is on McDaniel, because Skyler's been there for 3 years.
Right.
None of those skills really apply and transfer. And whether the play calling is different or, geez, I can't quite convincingly get these play fakes down or anything like that, it creates this huge drop.
And even the pre-snap motion doesn't seem to help. And this is gonna stroke the Mike Tanier ego a little bit, because I made a second text message to an NFL executive who studies film, and I thought that this really jumped out. He said the thing about Tua is that he's accurate and has a quick release, but he also throws into holes, which lets his guys run and make big plays after the catch. He understands that offense better than anyone else. Right. So kind of reinforcing your viewpoint and your analysis of Tua and the Dolphins. So I'll throw this to you. Thursday night, major barometer game for them in Lambeau. The Dolphins with Tua right now, real or mirage?
Real enough to stay in the playoff chase, but they need help. Their upcoming schedule is manageable. I'm fairly certain they've got 2 Jets games coming up. The problem is they're going to need help from the Broncos and they're going to need help from the Chargers. I don't think the Broncos are going anywhere, and I think the Chargers are kind of what they are. You saw last night; they're not in the same class as the Ravens, but they can play with the Ravens. So I'm trying to look up the spread right now, and I'm struggling. Plus 3.5. I don't even know if I take them plus 3.5 on the road in Lambeau, in part because it's a Miami team in Lambeau at night, and I don't know what the weather's going to be. But what about you?
Potential snow. I
Oh,
think I think that they might be a bit of a mirage. I think they're playing really well, but they also have the feel of a team that when they play their equals, they kind of wilt under the pressure. We saw it against Buffalo earlier this year.
mhm.
I just don't see them right now as a team that plays above their head, punches above their weight.
They don't like. I mean, and that's the thing. Their equals are like the Broncos.
Yes,
Their equals are that caliber team, and maybe the Packers are kind of their equals. We were talking about 7-3 team that's in a second tier. This is a game that they have to demonstrate on. Okay, and especially it's going to snow, it's going to be cold. You're up in Lambeau, which means it can't be vroom 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 with Tyreek Hill offense and everything like that. Let's see what you got here. Otherwise, yeah, you are better than all the Patriot levels slop at the bottom of the AFC, but you're not quite there. And one reason you're not quite there is when your quarterback goes in the tank, you go in the tank.
absolutely. And let's, we haven't really done power rankings on this show. We did last week the AFC top five. Let's go through our top five and where we think things stand across the entire league right now, because I've thrown out my top five on threads a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten a lot of pushback about some of these picks. So shockingly,
Right.
people are not thrilled with my rankings, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it'll be a fun exercise to see how you and I view the top five, the creme de la creme, the class of the league right now.
Okay, I'll put them in order. I put them in alphabetical order on the thing
Yes.
on our planning document. But and DVOA is sort of fueling this. DVOA says there's a top five and there's a gap. But I'm not looking at that right now. I'm going to put the Ravens at number 5, Chiefs at number 4, Eagles at number 3, Bills at number 2, Lions at number 1. And you?
Very similar, but we're going to go top to bottom on mine because
Okay.
the discrepancy is at the bottom for me. Detroit Lions, the Lions and everybody else, they're the number one team, most complete team, most dominant team. Everything we said about the Eagles, Detroit's doing in spades, 10 times what Philadelphia is doing right now. Eagles at number 2 for all the reasons we discussed earlier. Saquon Barkley, dominant offensive line, number 1 defense in the league, opportunistic.
You're saying you got pushback from Bills fans on that?
Did not.
Really?
The Bills
Oh,
fans
yeah,
have
wait.
been
Okay, I got to wait.
quiet. The
Okay.
Bills fans have been a little bit quiet on this. I have them at number 3. I have
Okay.
Buffalo at number 3. Josh Allen can take over a game in an instant. They have the signature win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Defense creates turnovers when they need to, but it's not just Josh Allen on offense. It's not just that he's throwing to guys like Curtis Samuel and an inconsistent Keon Coleman and a when he's healthy, maybe he's there, maybe he's not, Amari Cooper,
Yeah.
but they have a sledgehammer in James Cook that can beat you in the running game too. So they're multifaceted. So the Bills at number 3. This is where the pushback came in. I have the Ravens at number 4. I have Baltimore at number 4 because they're the number 3 passing offense in the league with Lamar Jackson, and they're not throwing because they're behind, guys. They're throwing because it's
Right.
what they do. They're throwing
Yes.
because they have a quarterback who's matured in terms of using his legs to create downfield opportunities in the vertical passing game. They have a battering ram of a running back in Derrick Henry who might win Offensive Player of the Year. They have a really good defense, and then number 3 in the league or something like that in rushing offense. So they're really complete. The pushback comes from Chiefs fans who the Chiefs beat Baltimore in the opener. But I look at Kansas City right now, even though they're 10-1, even though they escaped against Carolina, they had to escape against Carolina.
Yeah.
And tell me where the signature convincing victory is against a playoff caliber opponent that isn't the opener against the Ravens.
That's the thing. It's the opener against the Ravens, so that's one of the things there. And I'm fine with moving them around. I think Chiefs fans are a little insecure about their position right now as this team that is walking a tightrope, and how much leeway we give them when we do power rankings in terms of them being the Chiefs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. because they have the head-to-head against the Ravens, because I keep waiting for the Ravens to stop committing penalties, and they go out and have 100 yards of penalties last night, and I have to realize this is probably baked into who they are this season. I keep the Chiefs ahead of them, but of course this can change. And I watched that escape against the Panthers, and it shouldn't have been that close. And
Right.
they were giving up, and they were being so hyper. They had a 2-score lead, and were so hyper aggressive on both sides of the ball, and almost a level of arrogance that they let Bryce Young throw over the jailbreak blitzes. And, Mahomes, instead of just handing off to Kareem Hunt, is like running around doing all this crazy stuff. It's like, you're up by 2 scores. Their quarterback's 5'3", just win the game. And they needed Mahomes magic at the end. I don't mind those. I'm surprised the Bills fans haven't come after you for this, though.
I know, and we're going to see what happens, especially Sunday when the Eagles take on the Ravens. We're going to see just how real Philadelphia is once and for all, and maybe the Ravens end all of these arguments about Kansas City. And the Chiefs, to me, Mike, they're in a little bit of a role of the hunter this year rather than the hunted,
Okay.
because I think the offense is still developing. They seem like they're a hair off.
Yeah.
From a turnover differential standpoint, they're in the negatives at this point. They're ninth in the league in point differential, which isn't as great as they've been in recent years.
Right.
And an NFL scout told me last week, as part of the mailbag feature between the hash marks, you have to trust what your eyes are telling you when it's backed up by data. And these concerns that people have about the Chiefs, they're backed up in both aspects. These don't look like the Mahomes dominant Kansas City Chiefs, and the data doesn't back up that they're the creme de la creme right now. With that said, as long as you have Andy Reid, as long as you have 15, there are no nails in that coffin. Until the clock strikes 0-0-0-0 in an elimination game, the Chiefs are always going to be in the mix. But I still think the Ravens and their brand of football travels better right now than what we're seeing from Kansas City.
Fair enough. And it is kind of like there's what you see, there's what the numbers tell you, and the Chiefs, I think, are 11th in DVOA right now. And then there's the mojo. And you must have 2 of the 3, and the Chiefs only have the 1 of the 3, and that's the mojo at this point.
Correct. Now, we've talked about the top 5. Nobody ever gets into number 6. 6 feels like the left out number, the left out team, the forgotten redheaded stepchild, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, not included in these rankings. Who's your 6th, and does it matter? Can a team come from 6 and win a Super Bowl?
My number 6, many other seasons, yes.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to happen this year. My number 6 right now is the Broncos.
Ooh, I like it. I like it.
Because they're playing such fundamental complementary football. I watch Bo Nix, and it's like, is this a mirage because the defense is really good? It is not. It is not. It is weekly development, weekly confidence. Like, here's a throw he couldn't make 3 weeks ago that he just made this time. It's him getting Devon Vele involved and him finding a favorite guy there. Their running game gaining confidence, like the whole offense coming together, defense staying solid. So that's the team that I think is going to work their way through this. They are not a threat to anything to reach the AFC title game. I think it's going to be it's going to be 2 of those 3 teams in the AFC title game, but they're my number 6 right now. What do you got?
I have the Steelers at number 6, the Broncos at number 7. But what the Steelers do, it travels. It typically does, and they have one of the best defenses in the league. They have a really good running game. To me, Mike, a fluky division loss to a rival in a blizzard on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
With 4 days to prepare, going on the road, that doesn't change what they are. Now, what they do coming off of that game, that's going to tell a lot. But similar to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes always having them in the mix, I can't write off a Mike Tomlin team until they make their playoff exit.
Right. But the thing is, they always make a playoff exit. Right. That's the problem.
Correct.
But it's interesting. We picked AFC teams. The Commanders have settled. They're finding their level a little bit. The Falcons are the Falcons. And there's no 49ers in our conversation anymore.
And Arizona just isn't quite ready. They're just not quite ready. And Seattle, really gutsy win by the Seahawks. I love the Kobe Bryant pick 6. I love what Mike McDonald is building there. They're a team on the come up. I think that they're a team to watch, but they're just not quite. I don't know that they beat anybody in a playoff game.
No, they're especially right now. They got these close wins in a division that's full of just mucky football here. You can't elevate past that division title based on what you're doing in those games.
Let's fast forward here and go to our circle game. Who do you got this week? What do you have your eyes on?
Did I put Falcons Chargers in the
You did. That was the circle game.
I must have been drunk. But no, seriously, if there's 2 teams If there's two teams that bring out the worst in me, longtime readers, viewers, it's the Falcons and the Chargers. The Chargers, because of my Justin Herbert skepticism. Monday night we had another, martyrdom game for Herbert where he in fact did play very, very well, suffer some drop passes, and gosh, it's the same story every day for 3 years with him. But they're a solid team up and down. I don't know what the Falcons are. They're supposed to be
Falcons find a way to Falcon. It's Falconry Sunday every single week.
The Falconry Sunday. The Falcons made Kirk Cousins more Cousins. Kirk Cousins made the Falcons more Falcons. They're going to win the division by default. I want a quality win from them to care about them in any way. And I need a comeback and play a solid game from the Chargers for them to be anything more than the one and done team that gets into the playoffs because you can beat up on the Raiders, etc. It's also a 1 o'clock game. You don't see the Chargers at 1 very often. We've seen Chargers at night a couple times in a row, so we got a closer look at them. And now it's a 1 o'clock. Sit down and get your Herbert on Sunday afternoon. And also, I left the big one for you, right? What's your circlet game?
You did. It's a potential Super Bowl preview, Eagles and Ravens in Baltimore. And I say it's a possible Super Bowl preview because I don't know that there's a team in the league better equipped to take advantage of the forthcoming Dan Campbell brain cramp in a clutch situation of a big game than the Eagles right now.
Right.
It's a showdown between 3 MVP favorites. We're going to find out a lot about the MVP race, which we touched on earlier. Eagles defense might be the biggest test of the season so far for Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson's going to reveal just how real or mirage this Eagles defense is. It's one thing to create timely turnovers and score off them against Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. It's another to do it against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll find out a lot about the Eagles. We'll find out just where the Ravens stand. That's my circlet game.
I just thought of something, an NFC Championship game where Sirianni and Campbell both keep going for it and not getting it and getting more and more weird and stubborn about it and like getting penalty after penalty. And it's like 4th and 54 and both of them are trying to convert it. And it would just be absolute chaos.
Absolutely. We usually end this thing with the circlet game, but we have a very special guest we're going to bring in to talk about the Thursday night games, all the Thanksgiving games. We're going to talk about the Thanksgiving food power rankings. My daughter Sophia is off from school. Like they have the entire week off for Thanksgiving. Sophia's here. She's ready to go.
Civilized. Happy pre-Thanksgiving, Sophia.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much. Get her a little closer to the mic.
Go over here so you can talk a little bit louder. You can sit on my lap if you want.
Sophia, who you got in your hand there?
Well, we're going to pick each of the games.
Who's the kitty cat? Is that Sir Pa?
Who do you like? Who do you like in Lions versus Chicago Bears, the first of the Thanksgiving games? Who are we picking? Who's going to win?
Lions.
What do you have here?
Why the Lions? Oh, who is that? What's the kitty cat's name?
Is that a Nittany Lion? Is that a lion?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's her Nittany Lion. She's going with the Detroit Lions, complete with the powder blue tie/scarf for the occasion.
That's perfect. So the Nittany Lion is ready to be a Detroit Lion as well. That's fantastic. You also have a kitty cat walking around behind you. What's that kitty cat's name?
Tigger.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Tigger decided he wanted to make an appearance as well. I'm going with Sophia on this one. I think the Lions put on a show. Caleb Williams showed the other day that he couldn't close in the big moments against the Vikings. And this Lions team just seems like they're on a mission. Great national stage for them to flex their muscles a little bit more.
Absolutely. You know the wonderful thing about tigers, Sophia? It's that tigers are a wonderful thing. Their heads are made out of rubber. Their tails are made out of spring. You didn't know that?
No.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's get to the next.
Yes, let's go to the next game. Who do you like? Well, I assume you're taking the Lions?
Oh, gosh, yes. Heavens. Heavens, yes. Now, the next game, Sophia, is the Cowboys against the Giants.
Who do you like in that game?
The Cowboys.
And why do you like the Cowboys?
Because the Cowboys are better than the Giants.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
I can't argue.
You cannot argue with that. I think I'm going to go with the Cowboys as well.
Yeah, you look at, I wrote about this at length in the column on Sunday, Mike. The quit was stronger in the Giants than I've seen in any team in my 30 years of watching football. I don't think I've seen a team quit harder on a season and on a head coach than the Giants quit on Brian Dable on Sunday afternoon. That game was 30-0. And then worse yet, these guys go into the locker room and they couldn't find a microphone that they loved more than the last to tell the world how badly they quit.
And we can't repeat anything they said in front of Sophia. You're here to keep it clean here. You and Tigger and the Lion are keeping things clean. We've got one more game, right?
One more game. Packers or Dolphins? Who's going to win that game? Who's better? It's
Packers.
You're gonna go with the Packers, right? Your dad and I aren't sure who's better either.
No.
We're kind of guessing on this one. I think the Packers are a little bit better, right?
I think so. I look at Jordan Love, and he's had some performances where you say, okay, I see it. The game against the 49ers, you go going toe-to-toe, coming up short against the Vikings, but putting up some great numbers. Seems like he's ascending. I love the offensive scheme with Matt LaFleur. I just don't love the Dolphins at night in the snow in Lambeau.
I agree. And I think the weather is probably the one thing with the point spread that keeps me saying uncomfortable with the Packers. Now, Sophia, are you ready for Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Do you like Thanksgiving dinner?
Uh-huh.
Now, we're going to do a little ranking here. We're going to figure out what your favorite foods are. Now, not favorite food in the world, but favorite food that you get at Thanksgiving. I'd like you to give us your number one.
Mashed potatoes.
Number one,
mashed potatoes. What are you going, Mike?
I'm going to go number one with my homemade stuffing made with a sweet Italian sausage and celery and onions and some other secret ingredients and breadcrumbs. But I do like mashed potatoes a lot. And you put a lot of butter in them?
Mm-hmm.
Always load them up with butter. I'm going to go with you with my wife's homemade stuffing. No sausage in this stuffing, but the stuffing, the stuffing is the star attraction. The rest of the plate is built around the mountain of stuffing.
Yes, the stuffing is sort of like a casserole.
Yes,
that like everything builds out of. So that's number one.
What's
Sophia,
number
we
two?
need your number two.
Biscuits.
Biscuits.
Like my wife might put biscuits at number two. Where I have to ask your dad, where do the biscuits come from? The little Pillsbury Doughboy, or do you get them from someplace?
We go Pillsbury Doughboy typically. I know it's easy, but there's so much else going on in the kitchen that day that tossing the biscuits in seems like an afterthought.
We're not Southerners. We don't like home make the biscuits. The Pillsbury Doughboy, and there's a lot of butter on the biscuits too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
You're young. You can carbo load like that, and it's not going to make you fat like it makes me. I
still carbo load. And you've experienced this in Atlanta in Super Bowl week.
Yes, I've seen. Do you know, Sophia?
Yeah.
You know, one time your dad had macaroni and cheese with his dinner and then ordered macaroni and cheese for dessert too. Did you know that?
No.
Mike and I had dinner together leading up to a Super Bowl, and we were at this great like open jazz bar in Atlanta. But it was a blues bar, really, and live band, live music. The mac and cheese was off the hook, and I said, Mike, what do you think about ordering another round of mac and cheese for dessert?
And we both did. Do you guys have mac and cheese at Thanksgiving?
Sometimes, right?
Sometimes you do lasagna at Thanksgiving?
No, do you?
No, we don't. My grandma did back in the day. We need a number three, though. A number three favorite. So we have mashed potatoes, biscuits.
What's
number three on your list?
What else is on your plate? What's your
dessert too? It could be dessert.
Pumpkin pie, and she also likes pumpkin pie.
The Lion likes pumpkin pie too?
Wow.
Amazing. So you're the pumpkin pie fan in the US of A.
Mm-hmm.
I also have pumpkin pie, maybe at number 4 on the list.
Okay.
Number 3 for me has to be the mashed potatoes.
I like turkey.
Yeah.
I actually like turkey. I cook it myself. I cook it upside down. I season it very carefully. So, and I don't eat desserts. So I don't eat desserts in general.
So I need to ask this then, because in terms of where all those carbs come from, if they're not coming from the desserts, a great tragedy. One of my favorite breweries seems to be discontinuing their holiday beer this year. It was a Belgian beer. It was called Rudolph's Reserve. So they took like a Belgian triple, loaded up with holiday spices like the all clove, and the ginger and the little bit of cinnamon in there. I can't find it on the website. It's not in the shelves. It's not on deck on their website, which seems to be a very bad sign when it comes to microbreweries. I need recommendations for what to wash down the turkey and the pumpkin pie and all of the stuffing with.
Right. And if it's a micro, you can call them and talk to them about it. You won't get, they can't just make a batch of it for you real quick. They can put it on the menu for next year because they'll listen to their customers. But
Yes.
they do. All these dudes, all these young dudes with their, well, you're a young dude, but with their IPAs, everything's an IPA.
Oh, thank you.
They take the Belgians off the menu, so I can relate to this. Now, one is to splurge a little bit for Chimay, actual Chimay.
Okay.
We're on a Substack budget, so that could be tricky. So let me see what I got lying around here. Now, this, I think you're familiar with these guys. Weyerbacher.
Oh, yeah, Weyerbacher. Yes.
Yes, Weyerbacher makes Merry Monks,
Okay.
which is a Belgian that has a lot of spice notes and like weirdness to it, like cool, funky things. The super affordable choice, which you might have a hard time getting on your side of the river up there in the Bucks County area, but in Camden County is easy to get flying fish. Can you get flying fish where you are?
Ooh, I might need to find it. Maybe at a Wegmans in a build your own 6-pack situation. I might be able to get some flying fish.
Yes, because their Abbey Double here, I when I discovered it about 5 years ago, it's like 80% of Chimay at 40% of the cost. And
There you go.
That's a win. And a lot of character, etc. Yes, after all the dinner and everything like that, I negotiate with my wife as to who's going to take my mother home. She wins. I take my mother home, or we send the 22-year-old to do it.
There you go. You get to stay home and drink some Weyerbacher and some double,
and just enjoy that and sit and watch the football games and maybe start a fire and absolutely enjoy your time. But it was absolute pleasure podcasting with you, Sophia. You want to say? Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanksgiving.
Did you see Wicked?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Uh-huh.
Who's your favorite character?
Agatha and Glinda.
Okay, so you like them both. Wonderful. You know who my favorite character was?
The wizard.
The wizard? Oh, I don't like the wizard's kind of bad, any. Spoiler alert. My favorite character is the Teacher Goat. Remember Teacher Goat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope he's going to be. I think he's going to be okay in the sequel. But he seems like a really good guy, and he was really helpful to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mike, this was a lot of fun. Be sure everybody follow Mike Tanier on Threads at Mike Tanier. I'm at Matt Lombardo NFL. Subscribe to the Two Deep Zone on Substack. Subscribe to Between the Hash Marks. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave us those 5-star reviews. They help grow the show. This week's 5-star review, Mike, comes in from MPH161. Says, I love Matt and Mike. They have good analysis and great energy. I follow Matt on Substack and love his work. Hey, MPH, go subscribe to Mike as well.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And Sophia, you are a natural at this. It was really great getting to know you today.
You're welcome.
Mike, have a happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and we'll talk to everybody next week after the holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.